coming. For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Vicky Keen. The purpose of this meeting was to try and address a lot of the conversations, the concerns, ideas, concepts that keep getting put out there throughout our community on the concept of a family residential center in our community within Dimmit County. So it thought occurred to me that if we collectively got together and brought in some outside resources who are more versed in these types of details than any one of us probably is overall, that might be helpful and beneficial to our community. Having said that, how about we start with the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And the Texas flag. We cannot forget the Texas flag, ladies and gentlemen. We honor the Texas flag.
I pledge allegiance to the...
Oh my goodness, folks, what happened? You got it? I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. A couple of little housekeeping items, actually one very particular. It is the intention of this meeting to provide information and attempt to answer questions. Therefore, any and all attendees and or speakers should not rely on any of the materials for purposes outside of this meeting. It is being recorded. I'm sure that Mr. Garza will make sure that we all have that available to us. My thought was to start with an overview because there's been a lot of confusion about course of events. How did we get here? What is a family detention center? Why are there two different locations that are people are talking about? There's Stratton Industries and then there's Target Logistics and CCA. On March 10th, ICE actually published a request for information for family residential services. On March 16th, ICE and DHS Advisory Board actually met in San Antonio. Is that right? And at that meeting, the advisory meeting, there were several advocacy groups that spoke out against these facilities and made recommendations to that committee. On March 24th, the actual RFI responses were due to ICE. So it kind of put things in perspective. Before the June 10th meeting, before our commissioners court, March 24th is when all of the requests for information had already been issued. So that was almost a month prior. In addition, on that RFI from March 24th, it does specifically state a formal request for proposal or an RFP outlining all specific requirements may be posted at a future date. As of today, they have not published an official RFP. My assumption would be they probably don't intend to because how vocal the community has been. So then we move forward to June 10th, which is when the consideration for the intergovernmental agreement first came to surface through the County Commissioners Court. And then June 27th is when our county commissioners and the judge voted it down. Moving forward from that, it was into July 20th, when Dan Stratton published the town hall meeting that he intended to have on July 28th, and he scheduled it. He followed that up about on the 26th or 27th, offering to donate now the property in question to the county. And it was highly publicized that the county actually denied that acceptance. It was actually Judge Ponce who made that verbal and put that in writing. And then July 27th, as most of us are familiar, Stratton called off, and he did that through a press release and other venues, saying that he was offering it to another community at a different location. That kind of brings us full speed. The things that aren't included in there that I want to point out and give you some consideration for is the fact that the RFI responses were due back in May. Stratton is not the only one who responded to the RFI. There are other organizations and structures and companies out there. We happen to have Target Logistics here locally, who does own the property, who can function as a leasee to the leaseor, which is CCA. The reason those components are critical and important to pay attention to is because that's exactly what they did at the Dilley facility. They did not require going to the public for any acceptance or information or feedback. What they did was they extended an existing intergovernmental contract agreement that they had already established. That venue still is available to them. Now, I understand that in talking to individuals from Target Logistics that their current position, at least for those who are speaking out, is that they are gearing up now for what they're considering to be another influx in the oil field coming in January. That's their anticipation and their forecast. Two important documents that are going to come into play with that have already been formally requested from ICE is any and all documentation that has been submitted and corresponded through the Freedom of Information Act between ICE and Stratton Industries. That information is anticipated and has been delivered in writing to be sent over on the 15th of this month. So any of the other facilities and any of the other objectives that Stratton is actually working on, we should have a lot more information about what those details are. The second request for information that has gone in that we do not have a delivery date for information is Target Logistics and CCA, and anything they are attempting to do in order to modify their current government contract. There are other facilities and locations that are not family residential that CCA recently has expanded their contract to. They are more the detention type facilities. I know it's hard for some of us to differentiate those, but they actually do consider them differently, and how they house and maintain the individuals that are in these locations. Some of the questions that get posed is, what does Stratton have to lose? He's got a large, substantial facility out there. He's expended an enormous amount of funds on it. He actually has ownership for 2 of the parcels that are out there. And if he's going to attempt to relocate, what are those costs that are going to be incurred and will they offset? Just some of the questions I've asked myself, and I'm hoping that some of the documentation that comes in on the 15th will actually answer some of what his plans really are. I believe that was part of his intent when he was trying to donate, was to offset his losses and see if he could get the community and the powers that be to go in partnership. Again, Target Logistics and CCA, they can expand their agreement to their Carrizo facility virtually at any time, and they may have already done that. Some of the other issues is, what does family residential mean? I've put a lot of information out there and tried to do it in bits and pieces because the documents are actually fairly convoluted. Some of the high points of that, I think most of us know by now, but I'll go over a few. The facility is not what we would probably consider gated and secure. It is a free-moving facility. These are some of the requirements and stipulations of how these are structured. These are not facilities like what we're used to seeing. Anybody who's familiar with Dilley, because it's the closest to us, that is not the type of facility that they are anticipating here. There is freedom of movement within the facility. That is the intent. It is not intended to be a facility where there's lockdown in that sense. They don't want razor wire fences, those types of things, because they are trying to house quote-unquote families. And as family units, that could be males, husbands and wives, and children under the age of 18. Those are some of the big things. And whether or not those individuals are free to roam throughout our community, not necessarily, but they get into some of the logistics of how they're managed and how they're released, and whether or not they're in a position of asylum within the facility, or they're being released for a period of time to somebody within a family member. which brings about a lot of other issues for the communities. And where are they? Where are they going to be held? Where are their family members going to come pick them up? How is that coordinated? What are transportation issues? So in many, many cases, the more questions that are asked, the less true answers there are, and probably the more concerns. Some of the high points that I wanted to bring forward was some of the requirements in education, some of the requirements for medical sustainability for these facilities, to have a discussion about the massive debt that these programs leave and create for the communities they've been in. The other thing to touch on is, what is the future availability of these facilities? We're coming into a primary and presidential election. Where do the candidates stand on that? Right now, these facilities may go into place and then be gone. So anything that could facilitate as a bonus or a benefit to our community, then we're back to having a loss. And that ties back into the debt. And there's the issue of abuse in these facilities, which has been highly publicized. Just in the last 24 hours, I've read 3 different articles where there's more citations, more issues going on with facilities and abuse that's going on within them. So having said that, I want to introduce Alejandro, and he is here to talk to us. He's with the Grassroots organization. He's been kind enough to come down and talk to us about some of these issues.
Hey folks, I'm going to focus a little bit on the debt part of it, right? And the survival of these detention facilities, and about some of the abuse, right? If you have any questions, please make sure to just be like, hey, can you stop talking real quick and answer this question for me? I'd really appreciate that. So, I had been talking to Vicky since last week whenever Trenton was going to have the original meeting, and we were going to come in and have some infographics for folks and like let them know, hey, this is actually what they're not going to tell you. And because that meeting never happened, we were really confused because we thought that they were just going to have it anyway, sort of like in a secret, but they decided not to. But we did some research. There's a Bloomberg article about some of the stuff that around some of the debt, right, that are left when detention centers facilities leave. So if I could read some of those stuff for you, all right. So in 2004, a detention center in Sino opened up, and it was shut down in 2013, and it left the county with a $20 million debt. The same thing happened in Willacy when that detention center shut down and left the county with a debt. In Maverick County, that opened up in 2007, left it 7 years later, left the county with a debt. I feel that these are some of the examples, right? But like there is stories over and over again of counties actually just leave, or detention centers actually just leaving and promising all this money and just leaving the county in a debt. Yes.
Were those prisons or detention centers?
They were detention centers. They were the same thing that this would open up. I mean, there's semantics game over here. Like they are prisons. They're detaining people. They're prison-like facilities. But they're called detention centers usually when they're housing immigrants. But they were a jail.
That's what I was getting.
Yeah, they were in jail. I'm going to use the term, yeah, thank you for asking that. And I'm going to use the term detention center, but I mean a facility that usually houses immigrants, is a prison-like facility, and has guards, has inmates. People can't leave. People can't go in and out. You have to visit. There's people who check you in. Like, I'm going to use the term detention center, but we can use prison, we can use jail. It's all the same thing. Immigration and these companies have done, I think, a really good job of being able to say, no, this is a detention center, this is a jail, this is a prison, no, this is a residential facility. They're all very different things, but the reality is that they're all the same thing. The reality is that they're all detaining people who don't want to be in there. They don't let them leave. They have guards. They have fences. Those people are not allowed to go. So, in my mind, they're all the same thing, right? Yes.
When you refer to the debt, you said a $20 million debt. What was this debt comprised of?
The counties gave them a sort of, let me get this right so I can make sure that I tell you the right. The county gave them, from the Bloomberg article, the counties give them a sort of tax break money, like this is how much money you plan to make in these few years. So we're going to give you this like facility, we're going to give you these like things that add up to like this amount of money, and then you're going to pay all of this back.
So basically, they sold them a bond,
Yeah, exactly.
and they defaulted on it.
And they defaulted on it, yes.
So then couldn't the county sue the companies for the default?
That would be a good idea, but I haven't seen it done. I don't know if other folks in this room have seen it done, but I haven't seen it done.
What if they don't pay the taxes? Like one of that places here owe $53,000 worth of taxes as of last week. Why don't the counties go after these companies if they're making so much money? Why don't they go after them, collect the money?
I think that's a good question for the counties, right? Like, I don't particularly have the answer for that. I think that's a good question for the county, but I think that some of that has to do because of maybe some like negotiating that had already happened. Like I think that, at least in my experience, that this isn't a clean negotiation of like, oh yes, they're going to do this and we're going to do this, and then we're going to have like a hearing, and then people are going to vote on it. It's usually some like really shady negotiations, and then people leave, and why don't they sue them? That's a really good question. A question that I can't answer, but a question that should definitely be proposed to the county commissioners. Like, hey, you would sue anyone else. Why aren't you suing them? What is the negotiations that you made with these facilities that you're not going to sue them? I think that's a good question for county officials. Right? I'm sorry that I can't answer that.
I have two more questions. During your research, did you find a figure of how much it costs our hospitals, and when they, if God forbid, some of them die, was the county responsible for paying for the autopsies? And because now we do for all illegals that die, that they pick out in the ranges. Each county is responsible for each autopsy because now it's a law that you have to DNA all illegals, you have to DNA. So is our county, if perhaps, do you have an answer for who is going to pay? Is our county going to have to pay for that?
I don't have an answer for that because I don't know. Because as far as I know, when folks pass away, they pass away. I mean, we know people in Pearsall who hung themselves, who died, and then they just kind of disappeared. A lot of the folks that we knew there, I have a friend named, well, I'm not going to say his name. I have a friend named, not named, I have a friend who said that 2 people committed suicide while they were in Pearsall, while he was in Pearsall. Those people were never heard of again, and as far as we know, we can't get any records on it because the easiest thing that you could do is you could just deport the body, and that person that didn't exist in the detention center. There's a lot of like questions about like what happens when, right? Because there's also a project in Falfurrias who actually has to like identify people that pass away on the border.
This is what she's talking about.
Yeah.
We have to do that.
Yeah, but I don't think that that's like a government-run thing as much as it is like a group of people who are trying to do that. Like I don't, as far as I know, that's not like a government like obligation that you have to do.
Right now, when someone in the legal is picked up in DNA, if they cannot identify them, they hold them for X amount, I can't give you the time, but X amount of time, they bring them back to the county that they picked them up and they bury them. And they mark them the date, in case a family member shows up 2 years from now, 6 months, then they will dig them up and then they send them back to their country. And that's all very expensive,
Yeah.
very expensive to do all.
Yeah, and as my semi-expertise is detention centers, I don't actually know about that, but I could do some research on that if you need me
You
to.
would, I appreciate it.
I can talk to.
Because we need those figures to give for our county, for our commissioners, we've got to put pressure on it, with all the figures that it's gonna cost us here.
I have a question too. Who in these centers is responsible for these? They may have medical out there, but you know, a lot of things are not handled there. Because I've worked with the, they're not handled there. They have to go to the hospital. So who is responsible for paying that?
Those are the
I can
times.
tell you, but the way it works with us, like the illegals now, the government has this budget. When that budget's gone, the hospital needs everything.
Exactly.
And doctors don't get paid. So to sit there and say, that is not happening. And so who's responsible for paying the budget? Like I know at the detention center in Crystal City, If it was a U.S. Marshal detainee, the U.S. Marshal paid, if you got paid. The problem is a lot of these people end up getting transferred out. You have one patient that has a catastrophic illness, and it eats those funds up really quick. So it's not like ICE has this huge budget that they're just going to pay for everything, because when that little pot's gone, you need everything.
That's right. And I think that this maybe leads into some of the abuse that happens in the facility, because also they just don't take them to the hospital. Like, that is also the truth, is that people will just not get taken to the hospital. People could be dying in a detention center, and they're told to take water. They're told, oh, don't worry, you're okay. As a matter of fact, someone that like we're working with right now has a brother in detention whose feet are so swollen they actually can't even walk anymore, and they're scared that they're going to lose their feet, and immigration continues to tell them, you'll be okay. We've heard stories and stories and stories of people just taking aspirin.
That's a fallacy. Yeah, that's not true.
I mean, it is true from my experience, and I have like several years of experience doing this work.
Our experience was just way further than yours. I got a blister to go to the hospital. I've had to sit at the hospital for weeks because one guy said that he was thirsty. He goes to the hospital. They ran kidney tests. They ran rhabdo tests. They kept him there for 2.5 weeks.
That's true.
When we've had agents that have had the exact same thing happen to them, and they're turned out the next day. So let's be careful.
As long as they comply, they keep them in the
Let's make assumptions here. How we start firing bullets off.
Okay, I mean, that's fine, but I'm telling you that the experiences that we've had as a national organization that's existed for 35 years is that people don't get taken to the hospital that easily. And maybe it's different, and like, I'm not trying to say that like everything is the same everywhere, but I'm telling you that the experience that we've seen is that it is not that easy to go to the hospital. Maybe it's different here, and maybe it's different like in different detention centers, but it is very, very difficult because immigration, they are about, not immigration.
That's the problem right there. You're throwing out a generalized term, immigration. Now, immigration involves a whole lot of different agencies.
It does, yes.
Now see, Border Patrol agents are different from ICE, are different from Customs, are different from...
Yeah, and I'd like us to correct my term and not say immigration and say these private companies.
Okay, see now, the private companies have absolutely nothing to do with immigration.
So these private companies care about one thing, and it's about making money.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So when you throw out a generalized term like immigration, you're talking about a government entity.
Mhm.
Now, we have to abide by certain standards, very strict rules, and so on and so forth. If we tell an alien, you know what, now drink some water, you're going to be fine, we're the ones who wind up on the wire. We're the ones who wind up under investigation. We're the ones who have to answer the Mexican consulate when they show up, or the Honduran consulate, or whoever. So I'm just saying, let's be a little bit careful about what kind of generalized terms we're throwing out there, because if this is going to be recorded or anything else, or if anybody else gets wind of it, we don't want to have generalized statements like that out there. They're going to make us look incompetent.
So let me correct the term. Private prison companies care about one thing, and they care about making money.
That goes back to my question. Who is responsible? Is it really ICE, or is it these private companies?
It's
that are
private companies.
responsible?
The private
They're the ones
companies, yes.
responsible for the bill.
Yes. But whether they do that or not is a very different, like, question, right? Yes.
When the agents are talking, they have protocol they have to follow. They have to follow certain guidelines for whatever they're getting with. But these companies, these private, public agreements that are made by the operating systems, whoever's operating that facility. So those are, now that's a different animal altogether. You cannot blame agents, like you said, immigration is one thing. What the costs are being given is the contract amount that they bid out for. So for example, Stratton is a $50 million contract for 5 years. The operating system was actually going to be coming out of that money. So when we say, okay, we're done, the $50 million bid is out now, there's no more money left, who picks up the slack?
I mean, y'all will.
I think that's the question.
Well, we're already paying for
Yeah, like the truth is that y'all will, right?
We're already paying for every facility that put in.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yes, that would be.
We're paying the bill.
Yeah. And whatever debt is left in this county will have to pick up. So yeah. I don't know if there's any more questions.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So Stratton said it was gonna be a $50 million contract
Mhm.
now.
But he's told somebody lies.
Exactly.
You
So,
don't believe anything he says.
well, it was a $50 million contract, so $296 a head, right?
Yeah.
That's the average that
If
they
they
make.
have that,
A
right.
private company gets per day, per bed, it's $296.
I think for family detention it's different. I think it's like closer to 340 something.
Okay, well, I did the math at 296, that's $53,280,000 a month.
Uh-huh.
A month.
So,
Tax dollars, tax dollars. Our money.
Mhm.
now, you say you're working with people who are in these detention facilities,
Uh-huh.
family
Mhm.
units, and so forth. Obviously, you're working with, I'm assuming, the families of the illegal aliens?
Yes, I'm assuming you are correct. I'm working with folks who are in the detention centers.
Okay, so, from your standpoint,
Mhm.
the detention centers are a bad thing.
Mhm.
Okay. What would you have done?
What would I have done?
What
No,
would you
what
do?
would you
if-
have done? What would you have done with these people? I mean, aside from telling DHS that they can build 747 planes that they can round robin 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to fly to third world countries, including Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua. What would you have done with this influx of people? Because, truth be told, and again, speaking from experience, it's not Mexicans that are the problem. It's Hondurans, Guatemalans, Nicaraguans, El Salvadorans. This influx of people are the ones that obviously are spilling over into these family detention centers, or family, whatever we want to call them.
Yeah.
They're just changing the name because the funding changes. They're trying to call them daycare centers now because they said there's a law. Now, I don't know if this is true, but there's a law that you cannot detain a child.
So,
So they're trying to change the names again so they keep the funding.
so I'm not trying to paint you in your corner or anything. Don't think that I am.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I did ask the question, so.
What would you have done with these folks?
Of course. So I'm going to let you know that I'm from Honduras, right? So, yeah, I was born in Honduras. I was born in Chitoyo. I got here a really, really long time ago. Clearly, I speak English. And I think that there could have been a lot of other things that could have actually been done. And we could get into that, right? But I do think that the worst thing that could get done is actually open up a detention facility that doesn't actually do anything. Now, I know that it says, I know that they're like, we're detaining people to prevent them from coming over. That doesn't actually happen. Building a detention facility that is costing billions of dollars, costing millions of dollars, not only to myself, to y'all, was a bad move. Now, what would I have done? I feel that that's a different conversation outside of this context of detention facilities shouldn't be open.
Well, see, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because if we're gonna say, you know, we're opposed to detention facilities, what are we gonna advocate then?
I think that's for a different meeting.
Pardon?
That's a much larger subject than we're going to be able to cover here,
Right.
or that he is capable of answering.
Right.
But you're talking about the big picture of immigration. We're trying to keep focused on what could happen here in our community and what those impacts could be.
And
Those impacts are medical, they are educational, they are fiscal, and they do affect every major component of our communities. And it affects a lot of the people who live and work in this community because of what they do career-wise. But we're not going to sit here and solve the immigration issue or how to do another facility now.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
we do need to discuss what the impacts are if Stratton and/or Target Logistics and CCA
The
come
bottom
in
line
here.
is,
Because the community
what
needs
is
to
your
know.
answer for stopping them in our community? What's your answer?
I will get to that.
I can tell you,
You can help us.
I can tell you that, I can give you a brief answer, right? And then you and I can definitely talk afterwards, sir. Whose name I didn't catch, could you tell me your name?
Fisher.
Fisher. I could definitely, like, I think that there's a lot of things that could get done right. In the city of Austin, there is facilities, not facilities, there's places where people can go. This entire idea that people don't show up to court after they get released from immigration detention is a lie. It is over 80% of people who actually show up to court.
Careful. You got a lot of people here that spent a lot of years working, quite literally working with the system, and having worked both sides.
And you have someone here who's dealt with the other side of the system, right?
Now, I've been to the court dates.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them
Mm-hmm.
do roll call
Mhm.
on an entire docket, and name after name after name after name are missing. Now, you say that granted, you're right, small percentage don't show up.
Mm-hmm.
The courts are so backlogged that the percentage that do show up are still turned loose. But the ones that don't show up, you're talking about, what is Carrizo, for instance? Carrizo at one point was catching 10,000 a month. So if, let's say, 20% didn't show up to court, that's 2,000 people a month. So again, I'm not trying to paint you in the corner, okay?
No, and you're not, right? Like, I'm telling you that I dealt with the other side of the immigration issue, and at some point in the 90s, over 98% of the people, when in the 90s, there was not immigrant detention center. And these are statistics, these aren't me just telling you this. No, we're not in the 90s. I'm telling you that in the 90s, when there was not detention facilities, people were showing up to court. Right now, people are still showing up to court. The fact is, and this is a broader argument that we can definitely get into, and I'd love to discuss this because this is what I do for a living, and also this is where I come from, right? My mom also fled from Honduras and brought me to this country. And the fact is that most of these people are taking terrible, terrible trips through Mexico. And the fact that they would then not want to show up to court, knowing that they could possibly maybe win their case, is like a thing that like we need to talk about. Like, these folks do not have attorneys. They do not have access to free attorneys.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
No, they don't.
Because every single one of them.
No, it's not. Constitution guarantees, and again, we can get into that. I really would not like to, because I'd like to talk about the detention center, but the Constitution guarantees for criminal charges, immigration is a civil offense. It does not actually constitute, it does not actually mean that you get a free attorney. And that is one of the issues that is being brought up by thousands of attorneys who are suing the government right now.
Then explain something to me.
Okay, of course.
For every illegal alien that I send to court, I'm charged with illegal entry.
Uh-huh.
Why am I required to give them, especially OTMs, other than Mexicans?
Myself.
You're here legally, right?
Do you
I
really
would
want
hope
to know?
so. Now, for those that I process, I'm required to give them a list of free legal services. So
needs to be based on facts. So your reasoning for not wanting the detention facility or residential facility, whatever you want to call it, is based on the immigrant rights.
No.
And we're concerned more about...
That's actually not the argument that I'm trying to present here, right? The argument I'm trying to present here is actually that private prisons are here to just get money from this county. Now, you and I, we can disagree on why we think private prisons are bad. That's completely fair. But we do agree that I don't actually believe that it will be beneficial for this county to get a detention center.
That's where I was trying to go with
That's what we want to
That's where I
talk.
was trying to go with that.
Right, and there will be a debt left over. There will be the fact that utilities will be used for this county. Water will be more expensive. Light will be more expensive. These detention centers will pull resources from your county. And if these detention centers leave, they will leave you with a debt, right? because this goes on to the next thing, is that family detention right now is very, very contested. As you were saying earlier, it has been ruled that children cannot be held in a secure facility without a child care license. Right? So there's no argument over what it means to have a child care license, correct? You either have a child care license or you don't. Diddy and Carnes right now are trying their very, very best in court to make sure that they're able to say, we have a child care license. In the state of Pennsylvania, the other place that has a family detention center, actually just recently, not recently, God, this year went by fast, at the beginning of this year lost their child care license, and the state refused to give them another one, right? The thing that is not hotly debated is what it means to be a secure facility, because no one really knows what it means to be a secure facility. I think that it was here or somewhere else where we heard there's not going to be any guards. Well, there's going to be some guards with some guns, but the kids aren't going to see the guns. I've been to too many of these hearings to remember what it was said. I don't think that it was here. But it's unsecure facility. An unsecure facility means that people should be able to just walk away from the secure facility. In Berks, the example that I have is that the Berks officials have been able to say, of course, these families are able to walk away whenever they want. But they are told every single day that if they walk away, someone will either try to stop them or the cops will be called. And they will be brought to this facility. And the entire argument is, well, then this is a secure facility. If these folks can't leave, it's a secure facility, right? The fact is that Carnes and Diddy may not get a child care license. And if Carnes and Diddy don't get a child care license, that means all these other facilities will not get a child care license either.
So who issues that, the state?
The state issues it, yes. The Department of Family and Protective Services,
So
is that right?
the two that want to come here will have to get that license as of now, the law, or no?
We'll have to, yes, because a judge in California ruled that for you
Why is
to
it telling us?
be able to house children and women, specifically children, you have to have a child care license, and you cannot be a secure facility. That was appealed, and I believe that lost. It is still, you have to have a child care facility, or you have to have a child care
And
license.
that's why they're renaming it.
Yeah, and they're going to appeal again. The Obama administration is going to appeal again, or the administration is going to appeal again, and they may lose. And if they lose, that means that you need a child care facility and you cannot be a secure facility, right? So that means that the detention centers that come in here, if they cannot get a license, they cannot function. Or I guess they could function, kind of like Carnes and Diddy have been functioning this entire time. But they would be functioning against the law. And as Vicky already said, there is a presidential election. And family detention as a practice might actually stop after this presidential election. And this is my entire economic argument of that, like, if you want to invest in your county, if you want to invest in like the residents of the county, investing on something that may not exist in a few months is not a good idea. Investing in something that's going to leave you in debt, that's going to bring you higher gas prices, light bills, water, is not a good idea. Because as we've seen everywhere else, is these counties don't actually care about its residents, or these not counties, sorry, these private companies don't actually care about its residents. They care about the bottom line, which is money.
Nobody really needs to tell us that. We already know
Yeah.
that. We just need to know what the next step is to stop this. We don't need to know how
Correct.
bad they are. For the people, we already know it's not a good thing.
Yeah.
We need to know the bottom line, how we can keep fighting it here. That's all we need to know.
And I think that that's a good place for Vicky. I just want to let y'all know that I'm going to work with Vicky, and we're going to get an infographic that is just based on an economic argument, on letting y'all know, hey, these are the different facilities in Texas, and this is how long they've lasted, how much debt they left their county, how much, yes, it's how much money has spent to provide these facilities, and how much money they spent, right? Because maybe some of y'all are like, yeah, of course, this is a terrible idea. But there might be some people out there who are like, well, wait a minute, like, we know that South Texas and a lot of other places in the United States are like suffering for jobs. And a facility comes in and promises jobs and
That's
people.
that is a, okay.
And I apologize
That's
for
true in
that.
this county because we had one of the biggest oil booms we
That's
ever
true.
had in this county, and we had more people sign up for welfare during that time than before the oil boom.
And that
A
is,
lot cannot pass drug tests, so they do not. So him offering 400 jobs here means nothing.
So this is that's the other thing that we're gonna work on, right? Because Vicky sent me what actually the requirements are to work at this facility, and then do a comparison of like, actually, will most of the folks in the county actually even be able to apply for this job? Because I think that the answer is no. And I think that what's gonna end up happening is they're gonna end up bringing people from outside of this county. Correct. So I feel that I'm saying that my next steps are, as a person who is going to bring forward an economic argument, as folks here want it, I'm going to be able to provide those resources for y'all because that's the thing that I can do. So we're going to be able to bring, hey, this is what has happened in different counties and different states. This is what the requirements are, and this is what your county is going to actually see. Will you get 400 jobs? Probably not. And y'all can share that information with other folks, right? Like, hey, this is what they're telling us, and this is what we want to do. Like, this is, of course, an economic argument that they're going to give you, but this is the reality, and this is the truth. So that is what I'm here to support, right? I'm not here to convince you about anything around immigration rights. I'm not here to convince you anything on human rights. I'm here to support you and how you want to organize.
But we want to make sure that that information, the economic information, gets to our commissioners' court. These things about leaving the counties and that needs to go to commissioners' court.
Yes.
I also, who screens these people that they, ICE or whoever decides is going to put them in the facility? I can tell you that I work in the hospital, and no offense here, but not everybody that's coming over here is what they were doing in the 90s when they came to work.
Right.
I'm telling you, as a nurse, I have seen them, and these guys can tell you the same thing. They're not people that are coming over here to work anymore. There's serial killers, there's rapists. I can tell you sad stories about people that have lost their 5-year-old child. They brought mom in with the coyote and then took her 5-year-old and she'll never see that child again. So who's screening these people? Just because it's a mom and pop group doesn't mean the dad's not the bad guy.
So this is the other thing that like maybe, so in Carnes and Jelly, it actually only holds women and children. Burke's facility in Philadelphia is very different. It holds women, children, and men. As far as I know, I think that that's a type of like facility. I think I've heard that it's going to be 85% women and children and 50% men. I don't know what that means. I don't know whether it means women, men, and children, or just men on their own, right? The thing is that it is very, very difficult to try to get information from these private prisons about what they're going to do and who they're going to hold.
He would never tell us what the other 50%.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that the other 50% is men, right? I'm not quite sure about that, but I can just assume.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so that's the other thing, right? That like, those folks are brought in, they're brought in through Border Patrol and through immigration. If they get caught like outside of 100 miles of the border, they get caught by ICE instead of Border Patrol. They get sent to these facilities, but I can't tell you who that's going to be because I don't actually have the answer to that. And it feels that when we ask people the question to that, they don't actually have the answer. So that's another thing to pressure on your county commission. Like, hey, you're telling us all these things, but who is coming over? Is like a question, I don't have the answer to that. And I don't feel that any private company that is like wanted to go into a county has answered like sufficiently and well enough for people to be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. So, yeah.
A couple of things. We kind of got off track and all over the place. I want to return and come back to some things with medical and try and address some of those things that were brought up first. Okay? And when I'm giving you this information, I am giving you this information which is actually out there, and it is the actual requirements that are publicized for these facilities. Okay? That's where I gain the details and the information. I'm more than willing to share that link with everybody here. An overview of the medical requirements is, in short, yes, there is a contract. EMS, for example, our local fire departments have open contracts that are through ICE, not local. It is advantageous for them to have those contracts. We have a hospital unit, we have an EMS unit, we have a fire department unit that are in economic difficulties right now. For them to be able to have those contracts and to be able to take care of individuals and be able to bill those out is actually a benefit to those organizations. Where the deficit comes in is in the end, when those budgets run out and the dollars are done that were allocated for that, then yes, that becomes a burden of the community. Now, when those dollars run out, we're dealing with the federal government and what can be quote-unquote an open contract. It can be renewable. That's at their option. We don't have any control over that. To speak further to the medical is yes, they do require treatment. These particular facilities and the requirement for the beds that they have stipulated within the RFI and for the requirements for these facilities states there have to be 26 or 27 beds specifically allocated for on-site medical care. They're very specific about what the certification and the requirements for the people who are hired to treat those people on-site are. Now we're back to the whole concept of certification again. Do we have those individuals that are going to be coming in from outside of our community? Or do we have those people here that could actually go to work? Those are all other issues. Terminal illness. As the operator, and I will refer to it as an operator, the private companies, as an operator are required to take care of and make sure that they maintain an entire process for terminal illness. Again, when that contract runs out and those dollars are done, the community will pick up the bill on that because the operator's not going to. That's not their intent, is to expense care. Their intent is to earn income and profit off of having a number of beds. And burial, yes. All of those are components. All of those are clearly written, stipulated requirements. So eventually, yes, those will be the burdens, and that's part of the numbers that will come into this community at some point, presumably. The other thing we haven't touched on is the education requirements and what that looks like. Kathy, you want to touch on some of those? Because what I'm trying to do is focus us in on what is the answer and how do we stop this and building a case for it. And part of that is licensing requirements. We've already discussed the fact that there's utility requirements that are out there. There are stipulations for the facility that they're going to have to meet. There are state licensing requirements for the medical personnel that have to be out there. And there's stipulations on education. These are the areas that we can focus on as a community that can make it impossible for those operators and those private businesses to come in here and actually function. Because we can't stop them from pursuing a contract and negotiating for a business that they want to do.
Okay, I don't have all the answers, first of all, okay? This is just information I have gotten from ICE's Family Residential Standards Educational Policy. The highlights. The purpose and scope that they have is that all children residing in an ICE residential family facility who reach the minimum age required by applicable state law. So, Texas state law, how old you must be to go to school, shall be provided with educational services and programming appropriate to the minor's level of development and communication skills in a structured classroom setting. So basically, any child that comes in and is old enough to attend school, according to Texas state law, they'll give them an assessment test within 3 days of the time they get there. They'll be assigned to a specific grade level. If their age and their grade level based on the assessment do not match, they will place them according to their age. Then they'll adjust the work that they're expected to complete based on how they tested. And they'll retest them every 90 days. If it's decided that the child qualifies for special education, they have special needs, they need special education help, then 1, transportation services will be provided for those students who cannot, when their special needs cannot be met on site. So where are they going? Or who would be better served off-site or at a designated local education agency location. The facility staff will supposedly work with your local education agency to provide a free and appropriate public education for all students that they determine are eligible for these services. They will coordinate to provide classroom teachers and other personnel as necessary to meet the requirements of Individuals with Disability Education Improvement Act of 2004. The facility will supposedly work with the local education agency to provide the books and other instructional and evaluation materials. So, who is our local education agency? So what does that mean for us? We put the bill, our teachers have more put on them. They're struggling as it is right now. Students will be provided with a minimum of 1 hour daily instruction in each of the following core subjects: science, social studies, math, with language arts, which means reading and writing, and physical education in a structured classroom Monday through Friday. Supposedly, they should have this on site, but again, if the child qualifies for special ed, that may not be the case. While education services will focus primarily on the development of basic academic competencies, the secondary focus shall be on English language training. Teaching staff are required to be certified ESL instructors or actively enrolled in an ESL certification program. They will have educational field trips that should be provided for knowledge reinforcement. These can be on-site or off-site, and in fact, they are required to have no fewer than 4 field trips per year per grade cluster. Now, supposedly, the educational field trips are provided for subject-oriented activities involving art, career education, technical training, math, science, and so forth. The teaching ratio, the student-to-teacher ratio cannot exceed 20:1. I don't know what our student-teacher ratio is here for sure, but I know a lot of classes are more than 20:1. They have to be certified and qualified teachers, and you've already heard, they need to be ESL certified. So,
You know what the base pay is for teachers?
I don't have that information. No. But I do know they're asking a lot, and based on what I've read and what their requirements are, it sounds like better than what our kids get.
Yeah,
So,
it is. My son was denied to get in the pre-K because I make too much money.
exactly. Yes.
What happens when a 13, 14, or 15-year-old kid shows up in blackface tattoos with MS-13 on the side of his neck?
Technically, he's a juvenile. He's residing in this county. We have to provide educational services, is my understanding.
The operator of the facility has to provide.
But if they qualify for special education, then the local education agency must assist. What that necessarily means, I am not positive. I'm letting you know what I know.
If they're refused to take the test, then automatically.
That seems to be the way it works elsewhere.
We'll hear that one.
Questions, comments? I mean, I've got a whole little thing, but I don't think y'all want to read it. It's, yeah.
Aren't there any current ordinances that you put in effect? For instance, if the county had an ordinance that we cannot have such a facility over a certain amount unless you put up a $2 billion bond.
Our county rezoned this county to keep a gentleman's club. My question has been to the county judge and to the commissioners, why aren't you investigating if that lawyer out of Laredo, why can't we rezone the county I mean, I don't know if you can against the federal government. Rezone the county, not allowing these in our county. Why don't they, I mean, you can't answer that.
I can't answer
Should
that,
they even
but
investigate?
that's the same question I have, and in fact, one of the speakers during public comment on the June 27th meeting brought that up. Why has it not been addressed? I don't know. Like you said, that's a good question for our commissioners or county judge.
I think they're following their injunction for leaving here for 20 days to keep them, continue going forward. And then if we had someone in our county that would do that, and we do it every so often.
Right.
Keep them out. I mean, there's some,
Yeah.
they're not, you're not doing that, so.
No, but I agree with you.
Commissioner's Court are the one that should be doing
That should be doing it. Now, unfortunately, you don't seem to have their representation here.
Bonds, it's federal law says you can't stop it already. So you can't supersede federal law. But you can set that provision where they have to write a bond based on previous history where the counties have been left with debt. So you can set a bond so high that they won't come here, they'll go somewhere else.
My suggestion, and as uneducated as it may be, is to approach our county again and again, either privately or during public comment at Commissioner's Court, and just keep after them until you get an answer. Any other questions for me? All right.
That's where some of the concerns come from, okay? You've got a company who already has a partnership that is nationwide, who owns the land, has the facilities that they're moving into it, but yet they're telling us come January, their forecast is that our oil boom's gonna come back on the end of Fort Shell, and we're gonna have this influx, and they're gonna have a larger band camp.
But they
I don't know if y'all believe that, but I don't.
They couldn't even open that one because the sewer system didn't need it.
Now we're getting back to, okay, so here's some of the critical points. I want to focus on a few, but just give you a few of these, and then let's go back to here's what we can do. Because now we've heard, and it's obvious, if they want to extend their contracts, and these people went in, including Stratton, regardless of what he has had to say to us, they have the availability to do this. And now we have a better idea of what those components look like, I think, and how they can impact our community. And most of them not in a positive way. We haven't even touched on the law enforcement component of any of this.
Why, I'm just curious, if Dilly went in with it, if they choose to move out there on their land, why does the county have to even sign an MOU or anything?
They don't have to. If they can self-sustain the property.
They already have water wells and septic tanks out there.
So
Yes, they do.
They don't have to meet any standards, they're not at all? They didn't feel
Yeah, but they don't care.
That's when we would get into getting into other state organizations and regulatory commissions that would oversee those types of things, and that would take, exactly, thank you, Richie, and that would take our effort on our behalf to vocalize that and to raise the attention to those situations. And that is actually a very valid point, and one way that we can combat the facilities, both locations, at both locations. Some of the things I wanted to just recap on and go back to, if you guys want the website for the detention standards for family residential, which is extensive, I'll be more than happy to give that to you afterwards. And it goes through absolutely everything that these private companies are required, what their requirements are on every single level. The other components and why I think we need to keep this in focus has to do with the fact that they are actually looking for 2 facilities. They're looking for 2 facilities specifically to house 500 each. If those facilities are in place, they actually get paid for the beds that they have to house under the agreement, whether they're full or not. So if they have 500 beds and 27 of those are in the infirmary, they're getting paid daily for all of those. Now, there's a lot of estimates of what the operator makes per day. The one estimate I can give you that's actual isn't what they make, but what it costs taxpayers. And that number is $160 a day. That's what taxpayers are paying for each of those beds on a daily basis. So if these facilities do come in, they're still going to make, these companies are going to make their income, and we're still going to be paying the $160 a day for however many beds they have, whether they're utilized or not.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Who inspects them? Does ICE come in and inspect? How often do they inspect to make sure they're living up to their requirements? What is any of that? Do you know any of that?
That is a detailed process. There are requirements, and that brings us into something called the Advisory Committee on Family Residential Centers. This is the next step I see as a community to get our voice out there. The Advisory Committee on Family Residential Centers are the ones who are overview what the reports are, what the third-party reports are. They listen to the advocacy groups, even the lobbyists. But they are the ones who write and make and approve the policies for these facilities. Okay? They are the ones who met in San Antonio back in May. And that's where a lot of these issues came out of. Now, they haven't, to my knowledge, as of yet, incorporated any current changes based on that meeting. But these are the people that we need to get to have a voice.
And I was just going to say that the people in charge there, which I think was mostly the private prison companies, told them, you're giving us suggestions. We don't actually have to follow them. Like you're suggesting what we should do, but we don't actually have to follow them. And I don't think they've met since.
No, they haven't. That was the last meeting. And so I also have that information as well. But I think that is one of our next steps, is to go to that advisory committee because it is fresh in their minds. They have been hearing these complaints. It is current in the news. There are a lot of things that are going on, and the majority of them, if you look and go through the resources out there and available, are against the private companies. It's not so much the issue right now of what's happening in immigration and what our company's policy is, as much as it is that it's a system that's broken and it's not working, and people are paying for it, and it's the private companies who are gaining.
That new law that says you can only be detained for so many days. And he said they want to open up multiple facilities, no allow them to skirt the loophole by moving them around, bouncing around in a certain facilities and maximize them. The homeless, if they want to be effective for things, they're going to get facilities and not start those. So we have 3 facilities here, we have 6 facilities where we run around robbing them, and just keep so much as long as you want.
I also just want to say that the advisory committee said that this is actually why they definitely want to hear from people, and they're like really open to getting personal emails and be like, hey, these are our complaints that we have, and they're like very open. One of them was like, please email us. So I agree with you that that's a route that should definitely be taken. It should definitely be taken back. Well, this is the advisory.
There's 2 of them. I can give you the website for the information, and I will put this out there as well on social media. But yes, and I can link it directly to this entire advisory committee board. You know, and we can approach that individually and collectively as a community. I've already had some conversations with some other legal parties about drafting a quote-unquote community-type letter that we could do in a petition format. So I've worked towards some of those things. I don't have them yet. I do want to come back to kind of backtrack on this timeline thing, because we're still not going to know until the 15th or 16th of this month what Stratton's true intentions are until we get that information based on the Freedom of Information Act. It's going to be probably 30 days before we get any of the information that's been requested on Target Logistics and CCA. So we have a time frame to where if we're focused on getting to the advisory board committee and getting the information out there through the community, I think then we can focus on some of the other stuff as far as, here's the restrictions, that now that we know what they have to comply with, they're not going to make it. But we can't stop them from coming in here. Yes, ma'am?
Just so that we understand the scope of this, how many beds are they wanting to fill nationwide?
Those numbers currently are between 30,000 and 34,000 is what their forecast is nationwide.
And where do they want them? Where do they want these facilities
Yes.
to be?
Primary locations, what their requirements are within 90 to 100 miles of major facilities, direct thoroughfares, public transportation. We have I-35, that meets the criteria. You have to have, and Laredo and San Antonio actually fall within the guidelines. So as long as they meet some of those general criterias of where their facility is, some of the things that they're also required to do is provide a public transportation system. Well, clearly we don't have that in Carrizo or Benton County. So that would be one of the things that, how's the operator going to handle and manipulate that? Well, most likely they're going to do what has been done at some of the other facilities, and they're going to subcontract that out. You know, you see a lot of large buses moving around that are unmarked and unnamed. In a lot of cases, those are subcontract agreements, and that's what they're doing, is they're moving those people from one location to another. Was that what you were asking?
Also, physically, where, like what states do they primarily want them in?
Very specifically, they're looking at Texas, the other states. Do you have that?
California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, where they would ideally place these facilities.
Well, and the Arizona facilities were just in the news in the last 24 hours too because of medical conditions. And they've had issues with valley fever. CCA is being investigated for non-reporting medical conditions that they're required to do so. And it just happens to be in Arizona, so based on Arizona state law, and CCA has found that they have not been reporting any of the cases at all coming out of their facilities now. So they're currently under investigation, and there have been some fatalities. So these are the types of organizations who want to come and have their business in our community. Any other questions I can help you with? I think our plan of attack at this point, my recommendations, is to get to the advisory committee and voice our opinion there. Both on two levels, as a community and as individuals. I think that licensing requirements, both for medical, educational, and for child care, I think those are things that we need to work on focusing on because they will have those stipulations. And then we have BQ, and the fact that there's potential violations going on if they put these facilities in because they're not established to house what they're proposed to put out there. I'm more than happy to hear other suggestions. This is just based on all the research and the individuals I've talked with and what's been going on and spending an enormous amount of time on this.
Quick addition.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the lawsuit about the child care facility at the detention center is going to be finally heard sometime in September. I don't know what day, but sometime in September. Decide whether the detention facilities will or not have to have chapter licenses. So that's an update that could happen sometime next month. Judge in Austin, I don't remember the judge. There you go.
Okay, you said we could approach the advisory committee individually or as a group.
Correct.
What would be the best course of action? How would one go about doing that?
Their direct emails are within the website, all of their contact information, and it's on the site. They actually are fairly transparent in my experience so far, and they do want to hear from people. They want to know what our opinion is and why. So it's my hope that at least now we all have a little bit more information to collectively formulate what our position is and to be able to respond to that. Do you have anything?
Up here.
What's going on, guys? If you don't know me, my name is Clint Smith. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. Worked in the Special Operations Psychological Warfare Room. So I'm kind of trying to take that knowledge, figure out how I can apply to situations like this. So, for instance, one of the countries I went to was Afghanistan. And we did things kind of similar. We called it mapping the human terrain. So what we do is we chop right into a village where Taliban had moved in. So a lot of the misconception over there is that the population is divided in Taliban. You have the civilians. But it's actually a lot more complex. We have drug cartels just we have here, stuff like that. And the number one thing we need to do, because if you guys haven't noticed, it seems like to me personally, there's a ton of information. There's a lot of moving parts to this. And if you look at this room, I'm counting maybe 30 people max. So, one of the things we did in Afghanistan was get the population involved. The ways we did that, I can't really talk about it, but I know that I come up with plans and kind of disseminate it. And we need a task to organize people and get them motivated to take interest in this. That would be the first step, because there's no way that we're going to get anything done with this, with Vicky and Grassroots and Jose and maybe 5 other people, right? That's not ever, it's just inefficient. And I'm not saying we can't get something done, I'm not trying to be negative, but in all reality, it's going to be, slow moving, etc. So, the biggest thing is we talked about in our team briefs and stuff is setting up cultural institutions. And there's a thing called memetics, okay? So a meme is a unit of cultural information. And what that means is it's how you model how information flows through society. So we need to set up, groups that disperse memes. So like Alejandro talked about, setting up infographics and dispersing the community. I was thinking we could, do a documentary, for instance, and put it on CDs and give that to the community. Get every type of media or, infographic or anything that can possibly grab people's attention is going to be useful in this. And hopefully we can get more than 30 people at the next meeting. And I think we should have more than one meeting, we should meet up, organize, rebrief, have team leaders set up that kind of, hey, this is what my group's doing, this is my group's doing, this is what my group's doing. And if we do it that way, I guarantee we can get something done. Because from where I'm hearing, it's, the federal government's going to roll over us. I'm not trying to get into politics, but I personally think Obama is a narcissist dictator, right? So he doesn't really care about us, he's just doing whatever he wants. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are suffering because of that. I don't want to get my own personal opinions on immigration and whatnot, but, it is the case that there's a lot of people that are getting abused and getting mistreated in these camps. And it's all because of profit. And personally, I hate corporations. I hate people that are like that. And, I'm pretty dead set personally on making sure that this gets stopped. And, there's some things I won't say out loud. And so that's my basic pitch here, guys. I set up Freeze Up Vanguard. If you haven't heard of it, you can look it up on Facebook. There's a lot of moving parts to that group. Chris Parker, he's in the Green Vanguard right there. He's helped me a lot with that. And even if you don't agree with, some of the politics and all that stuff, I think it's just a good first step in the right direction. We got to organize as a populace, because otherwise, it's, we're going to kind of spin our wheels here. Questions?
Okay. Any other questions I can answer? If I don't have answers, I'll try and find them. I kind of made a blanket statement earlier, and I said, we haven't talked about law enforcement. And I'll be honest, it's because I haven't done all the research there or had those conversations. I know enough to be dangerous and know that having facilities such as these will and can put additional strain on our sheriff's department, our deputies, everything that is currently housed in our community, as well as the local border patrol station. So I will touch on that and leave it at that level. unless anybody else wants to talk about that at this point. I can give you the lengthy website direct addresses, or I can just simply put them out there on the web, on social media. It's probably easier than you can have the direct link for the things that we've talked about today. So, okay, I will do that.
I'm
Yes,
just
ma'am.
curious, I've been on social media and kind of followed the channel a little bit. Haven't been able to make any decisions on that. My understanding, and I worked at the hospital and I did home for years and tried to get the county, the city, the police department involved in working on our disaster committee for our area. I know how difficult it is to get people to get out and do things. So my question is the county sitting over here, am I correct saying that they're not interested in all this? Have they, where's the representation? Are they not in this fight with everybody, or?
Mike Davis is the only one that's cooperated with us so far. And Eddie has told him to go look things up and do that. He's the only one that had no
So none
response.
of the other city officials?
I have a solution to that, I think, and my solution is it's massive force. So maybe not so much go as far as protesting signs and whatnot, but I guarantee if we, got 30 people who went and said, hey, Judge Palm said, you're going to have to talk to us at some point.
So that's where some of the concerns come from, okay? You've got a company who already has a partnership that is nationwide, who owns the land, has the facilities that they're moving into it, but yet they're telling us from January their forecast is that our oil boom's going to come back on the import shell, and we're going to have this influx, and they're going to have a larger man camp. I don't know if y'all believe that, but I don't.
They couldn't even open that one because the sewer system didn't need it.
Now we're getting back to, okay, so here's some of the critical points. I want to focus on a few, just give you a few of these, and then let's go back to here's what we can do. Because now we've heard, and it's obvious, if they want to extend their contracts, and these people went in, including Stratton, regardless of what he has had to say to us, they have the availability to do this. And now we have a better idea of what those components look like, I think, and how they can impact our community. And most of them not in a positive way. We haven't even touched on the law enforcement component of any of this.
Well, I'm just curious, if Dilly went in with them, if they choose to move out there on their land, why does the county have to even sign an MOU or anything?
They don't have to. If they can self-sustain the property.
They already have water wells and septic tanks out there.
So
Yes, they do.
They don't have to meet any standards.
I mean, they're not-
at all. They didn't appeal.
Yeah, but they don't care.
That's when we would get into getting into other state organizations and regulatory commissions that would oversee those types of things. And that would take, exactly, thank you, Richie. And that would take our effort on our behalf to vocalize that and to raise the attention to those situations. And that is actually a very valid point in one way that we can combat the facilities, both locations, at both locations. Some of the things I wanted to just recap on and go back to, if you guys want the website for the detention standards for family residential, which is extensive, I'll be more than happy to give that to you afterwards. And it goes through absolutely everything that these private companies are required, what their requirements are on every single level. The other components and why I think we need to keep this in focus has to do with the fact that they are actually looking for 2 facilities. They're looking for 2 facilities specifically to house 500 each. If those facilities are in place, they actually get paid for the beds that they have to house under the agreement, whether they're full or not. So if they have 500 beds and 27 of those are in the infirmary, they're getting paid daily for all of those. Now, there's a lot of estimates of what the operator makes per day. The one estimate I can give you that's factual isn't what they make, but what it costs taxpayers. And that number is $160 a day. That's what taxpayers are paying for each of those beds on a daily basis. So if these facilities do come in, they're still going to make, these companies are going to make their income, and we're still going to be paying the $160 a day for however many beds they have, whether they're utilized or not.
I have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
Who inspects them? Does ICE come in and inspect? How often do they inspect to make sure they're living up to their requirements? Is any of that, do you know any of that?
That is a detailed process. There are requirements, and that brings us into something called the Advisory Committee on Family Residential Centers. This is the next step I see as a community to get our voice out there. The Advisory Committee on Family Residential Centers are the ones who are overview what the reports are, what the third-party reports are. They listen to the advocacy groups, even the lobbyists. But they are the ones who write and make and approve the policies for these facilities. Okay? They are the ones who met in San Antonio back in May. And that's where a lot of these issues came out of. Now, they haven't, to my knowledge, as of yet, incorporated any current changes based on that meeting. But these are the people that we need to get to have a voice.
And I was going to say that the people in charge there, which I think was mostly the private prison companies, told them, you're giving us suggestions. We don't actually have to follow them. Like you're suggesting what we should do, but we don't actually have to follow them. And I don't think they've met since.
No, they haven't. That was the last meeting. And so I also have that information as well. But I think that is one of our next steps, is to go to that advisory committee because it is fresh in their minds. They have been hearing these complaints. It is current in the news. There are a lot of things that are going on, and the majority of them, if you look and go through the resources out there and available, are against the private companies. It's not so much the issue right now of what's happening in immigration and what our company's policy is, as much as it is that it's a system that's broken and it's not working, and people are paying for it, and it's the private companies who are gaining.
They do law that states that nobody be paying for so many days. And he said they want to open up multiple facilities, don't allow them to skirt the loophole by moving them around, bouncing around in a certain facilities to maximize it. The homeless is that once these veterans remain, they're going to do facilities and not start over. So if you have 3 facilities here, you have 6 facilities that we run around robbing them, and keeping someone as long as you want.
I also just want to say that the advisory committee said that this is actually why they definitely want to hear from people, and they're like really open to getting personal emails, and they're like, hey, these are our complaints that we have, and they're like very open. One of them was like, please email us. So I agree with you that that's a route that should definitely be taken. It should definitely be taken back. Well, this is the advisory.
There's 2 of them. I can give you the website for the information, and I will put this out there as well on social media. But yes, and I can link it directly to this entire advisory committee board. You know, and we can approach that individually and collectively as a community. I've already had some conversations with some other legal parties about drafting a quote-unquote community-type letter that we could do in a petition format. So I've worked towards some of those things. I don't have them yet. I do want to come back to kind of backtrack on this timeline thing, because we're still not going to know until the 15th or 16th of this month what Stratton's true intentions are until we get that information based on the Freedom of Information Act. It's going to be probably 30 days before we get any of the information that's been requested on Target Logistics and CCA. So we have a time frame to where if we're focused on getting to the advisory board committee and getting the information out there through the community, I think then we can focus on some of the other stuff as far as here's the restrictions, that now that we know what they have to comply with, they're not going to make it. But we can't stop them from coming in here. Yes, ma'am?
Just so that we understand the scope of this, how many beds are they wanting to fill nationwide?
Those numbers currently are between 30,000 and 34,000 is what their forecast is nationwide.
And where do they want them? Where do they want these facilities to be?
Primary locations, they typically, what their requirements are with 90 to 100 miles of major facilities, direct thoroughfares, public transportation. We have I-35, that meets the criteria. You have to have, and Laredo and San Antonio actually fall within the guidelines. So as long as they meet some of those general criterias of where their facility is, some of the things that they're also required to do is provide a public transportation system. Well, clearly we don't have that in Carrizo or Hennepin County. So that would be one of the things that, how's the operator going to handle and manipulate that? Well, most likely they're going to do what has been done at some of the other facilities, and they're going to subcontract that out. You know, you see a lot of large buses moving around that are unmarked and unnamed. In a lot of cases, those are subcontract agreements, and that's what they're doing, is they're moving those people from one location to another. Was that what you were asking?
Also, physically, where, like what states do they primarily want them in?
Very specifically, they're looking at Texas, the other states. Do you have that?
California, New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas, where they would ideally place these facilities.
Well, and the Arizona facilities were just in the news in the last 24 hours too because of medical conditions. And they've had issues with valley fever. CCA is being investigated for non-reporting medical conditions that they're required to do so. And it just happens to be in Arizona, so based on Arizona state law, and CCA has found that they have not been reporting any of the cases at all coming out of their facilities now. So they're currently under investigation, and there have been some fatalities. So these are the types of organizations who want to come and have their business in our community. Any other questions I can help you with? I think our plan of attack at this point, my recommendations is to get to the advisory committee and voice our opinion there, both on two levels, as a community and as individuals. I think that licensing requirements, both for medical, educational, and for child care, I think those are things that we need to work on focusing on, because they will have those stipulations. And then we have BQ, and the fact that there's potential violations going on if they put these facilities in because they're not established to house what they're proposed to put out there. I'm more than happy to hear other suggestions. This is just based on all the research and the individuals I've talked with and what's been going on, and spending an enormous amount of time on this.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that the lawsuit about the child care facility at the detention center is going to be finally heard sometime in September. I don't remember the date, but it's sometime in September. Decide whether the detention facilities will or will not have to have child care licenses. So that's an update that could happen sometime next month. Judge in Austin, I don't remember the name. But it's being heard in Austin. There we go.
Okay, you said we could approach the advisory committee individually or as a group.
Correct.
What would be the best course of action? How would one go about doing that?
Their direct emails are within the website, all of their contact information, and it's on the site. They actually are fairly transparent in my experience so far, and they do want to hear from people. They want to know what our opinion is and why. So it's my hope that at least now we all have a little bit more information to collectively formulate what our position is and to be able to respond to that. Do you have anything?
Up here.
What's going on, guys? If you don't know me, my name is Clint Smith. I was a sergeant in the Marine Corps. Worked in the Special Operations Psychological Warfare Room. So I'm kind of trying to take that knowledge, figure out how I can apply to situations like this. So, for instance, one of the countries I went to was Afghanistan. And we did things kind of similar. We called it mapping the human terrain. So what we do is we chop right into a village where Taliban had moved in. So a lot of the misconception over there is that the population is divided into Taliban. You have the civilians. But it's actually a lot more complex. We have drug cartels, just like we have here, stuff like that. And the number one thing we need to do, because if you guys haven't noticed, it seems like to me personally, there's a ton of information. There's a lot of moving parts to this. And if you look at this room, I'm counting maybe 30 people max. So, one of the things we did in Afghanistan was get the population involved. Now, the ways we did that, I can't really talk about it, but I know that I come up with plans and, kind of disseminate it. And we need to task organize people and get them motivated to take interest in this. That would be the first step, because there's no way that we're going to get anything done with this, with Vicky and Grassroots and Jose and maybe 5 other people, right? That's not ever, it's just inefficient. And I'm not saying we can't get something done, I'm not trying to be negative, but in all reality, it's going to be, slow moving, etc. So, the biggest thing is we talked about in our team briefs and stuff is setting up cultural institutions. And there's a thing called memetics, okay? So a meme is a unit of cultural information. And what that means is it's the how you model how information flows through society. So we need to set up, groups that disperse memes. So like Alejandro talked about, setting up infographics and dispersing the community. I was thinking we could, do a documentary, for instance, and put it on CDs and give that to the community. Get every type of media or, infographic or anything that can possibly grab people's attention is going to be useful in this. And hopefully we can get more than 30 people at the next meeting. And I think we should have more than one meeting. We should meet up, organize, rebrief. Have team leaders set up that kind of, hey, this is what my group's doing, this is my group's doing, this is what my group's doing. And if we do it that way, I guarantee we can get something done. Because from what I'm hearing, it's, the federal government's going to roll over us. I'm not trying to get into politics, but I personally think Obama is a narcissist dictator, right? So he doesn't really care about us. He's just doing whatever he wants. And, unfortunately, there's a lot of people that are suffering because of that. I don't want to get my own personal opinions on immigration and whatnot, but, it is the case that there's a lot of people that are getting abused and getting mistreated in these camps, and it's all because of profit. And personally, I hate corporations. I hate people that are like that. And I'm pretty dead set personally on making sure that this gets stopped. And there's some things I won't say out loud, but I guarantee you this cannot happen in this town. I just got enough experience to ensure that. And so that's my basic pitch here, guys. I set up Freeze Up Vanguard. If you haven't heard of it, you can look it up on Facebook. There's a lot of moving parts to that group. Chris Parker, he's in the Green Vanguards right there. He's helped me a lot with that. And even if you don't agree with some of the politics and all that stuff, I think it's just a good first step in the right direction. We got to organize as a populace, because otherwise, it's we're going to be kind of spinning our wheels here. Questions?
Okay. Any other questions I can answer? If I don't have answers, I'll try and find them. I kind of made a blanket statement earlier, and I said, we haven't talked about law enforcement. And I'll be honest, it's because I haven't done all the research there or had those conversations. I know enough to be dangerous and know that having facilities such as these will and can put additional strain on our sheriff's department, our deputies, everything that is currently housed in our community, as well as the local border patrol station. So I will touch on that and leave it at that level, unless anybody else wants to talk about that at this point. I can give you the lengthy website direct addresses, or I can just simply put them out there on the web, on social media. It's probably easier than you can have the direct link for the things that we've talked about today. So, okay, I will do that.
I'm
Yes,
just
ma'am.
curious, I've been on social media and kind of followed the channel a little bit. Haven't been able to make any decisions on that. My understanding, and I worked at the hospital and I did trauma for years and tried to get the county, the city, the police department involved in working on our disaster committee for our area. I know how difficult it is to get people to get out and do things. So my question is the county sitting over here, am I correct saying that they're not interested in all this? Have they, where's the representation? Are they not in this fight with everybody, or?
Mike Idiotis is the only one that's cooperated with us so far. And Idiotis told him to go look things up and do that. He's the only one that had real
So none of
response.
you ever see officials?
I have a solution to that, I think, and my solution is massive force. So maybe not so much go as far as protesting signs and whatnot, but I guarantee if we, got 30 people and went and said, hey, Mr. Judge Ponce, you're going to have to talk to us at some point. So I stand, I've been kind of staying out of the light so I can understand all this and speak intelligently about it. But I think that's really going to be on the solution, because it seems to me that one person will go, or he just kind of blows it off, or And so if we get enough people together from our community and force them to listen, I think that will generate the interest that's needed. That's the only thing I can think of personally.
And bring it out to everybody.
verbalize it, he has made it public information, and to bring this issue to his attention and ask him, what can we do to prevent this? What is within the authority of the county? Is a bonding a possibility? Where are we at with planning and zoning for that area? Because it's outside of the city limits. I think those are all valid questions, and I think those questions need to be posed to the judge and the commissioner's court of, these are the things we have come up with and think are viable. How are you going to help us with them? You vowed that you're going to do everything you can to make sure these facilities don't happen. We collectively, as a small group in your community, come up with these ideas. How are you going to help us?
Also, the health issues, the sewer and the water issues are big issues. I don't know if our county has any control of inspecting those and make sure that
those are going to be.
Those are really a big concern. The people are going to get sick.
Those are going to be the major issues. Right now, both facilities are independently housed and serviced. Okay? It's still in our county, but we don't have jurisdiction when it's all on site. Until, or if, they apply for permits in order to expand the system or to connect to the water supply system, for example, Stratton and Carrizo Hills. And they did apply for it and it was denied. Those things could continue to happen. You know, Stratton has already stated that facility in particular cannot house the sanitation that's going to be required for this. It can't do it now. The system's already antiquated. It needs to be upgraded. We have a problem here that we don't have the funding to support and fix. Well, Stratton's position will be, well, out of X amount of million of dollars, I will contribute, and that's how they negotiate. We've seen it from Dilley. So they negotiate behind us and go, okay, well, we're going to supply you with the funds, and we're going to cap it at $300,000 so you have a new lift station. So in 3 years from now when we're gone, you've got your new lift station.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what they've done in Dilley. So those are things that we have to be aware of. Those are out there. Those are all feasible possibilities. And unless we're being vigilant about paying attention to what is going on in those governing positions and what is on their agendas and what are they ruling on, what is the water board doing, what is Asherton doing? They got Blue State going out all the way to Stratton's. What is that for? Are they connecting out there? Those are all things that come into play with this. And yes, we need the masses of people to be able to focus on certain things so that it's just not a core group of people trying to cover a plethora of issues.
No, I don't think there was any opposition to the facilities. Is anyone opposed to facilities when it came in? No, the general population.
There was nobody there in the meeting, or one meeting.
No, that's part of the problem. No one knew it was coming.
And the negotiations were strictly done by the city attorney. And that's one thing I want to point out to the law was the same. His attorney approved it. No, his city council, exactly. That's why it was that. They're all people in Trump. The ones that are pushing the buttons there, the city council is the attorney. So, this is my point.
No, okay, wait. We can talk in private. But in general, I think that, you know, we were a population.
You just don't have to this attorney out there, attorney like torches. They need to be aware. They need to be aware.
Our population was, I believe, excited for the job opportunities. But
the general public believes that. Look how many people are in this room. How many people are out there within our community and the county who earnestly, honestly believe that this is something that's going to benefit us. They're hurting. They're trying to feed their families. They want jobs. They believe something like this is going to bring them. but they don't understand what the cost of those very few jobs are, nor what the extended stipulations for hiring and training and staffing are, which is extensive. There's probably several of us in this room who couldn't even apply. So those are the things that are not out there, and there has been a plethora of speculation. There have been things thrown out there that are not supported by factual information. That's why I decided at least get a core group of people, whoever's interested in wanting to hear about what this is all about.
That's one of the solutions I thought of. So you can design meetings and metric structures to influence subconsciously, and I know how to do that. So the more that the populace, that's why we have to compress information and make it easy to digest, and then push it in social media, make flyers. If there shouldn't be an institution inside this county that doesn't have a flyer that says, hey, these are all the reasons you don't want this camp. So the more people see it, the more, it doesn't really matter so much that we're going to convince them in a setting like this. It's just, oh yeah, I saw that thing that said this. And I think that's one of the best solutions to getting information out there to topics and letting them kind of process it.
So the way I see it at this point is presentation to our judge and a conversation there about primary issues and how is he going to support and help us do that. One of the secondary support issues is Alejandro and Grassroots is willing to put together pamphlets and informational stuff so that we have that support too, to get that out there to the public as well. There's still research to be done, obviously. There are things like, somebody needs to be keeping an eye on what's happening at Carrizo Hills Water Department. Is there another permit that's been requested? Maybe, maybe not. Are they trying to go through Asherton as a city component in order to make a connection for the sewer system so they can circumvent our system and not have to put in a new lift station? There are a lot of opportunities that exist out there for these organizations to utilize because they want those facilities because they get paid per bed, whether it's full or empty.
I just wanted to say that I want to echo some of the stuff that Fisher, right? Yeah, because I actually think that it is a good conversation to start having of what happens in all of this. And it doesn't have to happen now, right? Like it clearly might not happen now, but I do think it is a good idea to be like, what happens if this facility actually goes through the county officials, the city officials don't listen, like what is done by folks? I think that would be like a really interesting conversation of what happens afterwards. And I just wanted to because I felt that was yeah, because I think everything else that's happening is really, really good. I just that conversation should also be this might be something that will happen anyways, and what are the steps that we take to prevent it, right? And I'm sure in Gilead didn't happen, in Carson didn't happen. And also there has been some counties and have cities that have been able to push folks out, and I think that those local resources that can be given to other people. I think they use their county power to make sure that this didn't happen.
Excellent.
So, I'm trying to think of in Florida so I can send you that information of what they actually did. Perfect.
I agree. I think absolutely. Because the elephant in the room is this could happen and both facilities could be here before we know it. That's a reality. Or they could both go away and decide to go to another county. It's feasible. It's possible. Stratton said he was going to. We'll see if that happens. But any other questions? Anything I can help with?
Is this property supposedly where they want to sell it? It's inside the city limits or outside?
It's outside of the city limits. It's within county jurisdiction.
That's the way our facility, where they live outside. But this company got to the mayor and they made a voluntary annexation. And now they don't want to pay their fair taxes for being inside the city. So it's just one thing that I want to know.
And the last one that I'm talking. And the last one that I'm talking about is taxes. We last week, over $63,000 to tax trash already to the school and
I'm sorry. I'm going to be part of it.
What, a tax lien certificate on that property? If he owes that money, if we came up with $53,000 something in his taxes, what tax lien certificate?
It has to be in default for a certain amount of time.
Yeah, it has to be in default. There's limitations on what that is.
They got artificial tax rate because the appraisal district appraised all the land and all the value they have to pay to do it. So automatically they got a tax rate right there.
We paid him last year, but up until last week, he had not, over $53,000, he had not paid. Now, whether he's paid this week, I don't know, because I haven't checked it. Because that was one of my concerns, that everybody's paying their taxes. All the rest of us have to pay our taxes. Maybe they have to also. So,
If someone were interested in helping with researching, creating pamphlets, disseminating information, how would they do that? Who would they contact and what would they need to do?
I was actually going to bring that up. If anyone here wants to participate, maybe after this is all said and done off camera, we can kind of start designating, specific, water, legal, this, that, and then that person can, be a team leader for the time being if they don't have time right now, but find someone that will take that position, and then kind of go from there. That way, this, instead of just being informational, we can have something to go on. Hopefully, this will be for everybody. So if that interests anybody, we can work that out.
Well, and I'm the one standing in front of the room. Anything else? I hope we answered some questions. Might have made more, but I felt like this was something that needed to come out to our community, and I thank you all for being here. Thank you for making sure we have the facility and available to do this. Appreciate that. And I think this is probably one of more meetings, I would venture to guess.
and I think we ought to use the newspapers as far as putting information in the
Absolutely.
newspapers, to the rest of the community, actual facts.
And I think that's part of one of the tasks that need to be assigned is to decipher. These are the very specific small bullet points to put it out there.
They've been there known for sensitive information, not
We can try.
I've already talked to
them.
people that understand.
And if we pay to put it in there, they can not have to get in there.
If you purchase an ad,
Okay, well,
Yes, I mean, we can purchase an ad.
exactly,
people that own the Star, they said they would, they're a free paper, everybody gets it.
right. I think the newspaper is a good source.
Yeah, I believe the newspaper is a good source, absolutely. I think that putting out public notices and getting it out there, there's got to be some saturation that isn't just strictly on a social media.
So, this is just my opinion. I think we should have another meeting next week. Somebody should bring their laptop. There's always one head's better than two or three. And you sit down and you make a bullet, this is da-da-da-da, and put it out there. I think if you need this approved, as opposed to, right, because you might have something that I missed. So I really think that if you do it as a group, I've worked with our region district disaster committee, and that involves San Antonio, a very large area. And I will tell you that if you get it together and you have several people on a committee, not just one or two, it makes for better, that's just my opinion.
If we do that and schedule another meeting for next week, and I'll be happy to publicize that and put that out there, I think the focus of that meeting then needs to be on specific tasks and generating these bullet points so we can get that publicized. And Alejandro, maybe by next week you can have some of the pamphlets and things for us. I would hesitate going any further, unfortunately, to go before the judge and our county until we have all the information on Stratton which is going to be the 15th or 16th of this month, because then we have actual documents, we know exactly what's going on, and that will be coming in. And that is confirmed. So by the 16th is when I should have all of that in hand. So I think, yes, I mean, if you guys are willing, I don't know if we can continue to use the facility here, or... Okay. Okay. I'm game, if you guys are, and we'll start working through it and do the bullet points, and I think it's probably, we're at least 2 weeks out, though, before we're going to be in an information situation where we can take some of these things to the Commissioner's Court and some of the other entities. Anything else? Okay, I'm adjourning this meeting since I called it to order. Thank you all.